We are now a week and a half into Lent. And chances are, if you've given something up or taken something on, you've probably experienced some temptation by now. Even if you don't have a Lenten practice, everyone has experienced temptation at one time or another. It might be saying no to something that isn't healthy. It can be an issue of morality and ethics. It could be trying not to procrastinate, overcommit, or staying up too late. Whatever it happens to be, chances are that you are working to align your behavior with your values, and you're working to achieve the kind of life you want to live. But what you might find that when you're working towards such goals is that while you may feel 100% ready and committed, it doesn't mean that the rest of the world is on board with you. The people around you might not get it. They might say, "What do you mean you aren't eating meat for 6 weeks? You don't want a slice of this cake I made? Oh, come on, one bite wouldn't hurt, right? You don't have to go home now. Come on, just stay a little bit longer." And sometimes when you tell someone no, it's like they take it personally. They can't fathom that you would try to set boundaries or limits for yourself, even if it's for a good reason. They might be insensitive, putting a box of pastries a foot away from your desk when you're trying to eat healthy. You might wonder why others aren't being supportive when what you're doing is hard and you really want their help. And when this kind of thing happens, do you ever want to look those people in the face and say, "Get behind me, Satan"? Well, that's what Jesus did in today's story from Mark. Here, Jesus is telling the disciples about how he will be rejected and killed, how he will undergo suffering. And hearing this, Peter pulls him aside and rebukes him. He probably said something like, "Come on, man, what you're saying is pretty dark. Surely you don't have to suffer and be killed. You're like the most popular guy in Jerusalem right now." But Jesus doesn't even entertain the idea. He turns to the disciples and to Peter, and he rebukes him back, saying, "Get behind me, Satan, for you are focusing your mind not on divine things, but on human things." Now, hearing this, you might think that Jesus calling Peter Satan is a little bit harsh. But remember that this is the same language Jesus uses elsewhere in the Gospels when he faces difficult temptation. And I don't think he's calling Peter Satan here so much as he's connecting the idea to how Satan has tried to thwart his mission and purpose all along. And if your reading is a little bit more sympathetic to Jesus, you might think, "Come on, Peter, get with the picture. Why can't you listen and be supportive to what Jesus has been telling you all along?" But really, Jesus and Peter are both in a difficult situation. Peter's response makes sense because Jesus is his friend and mentor. He cares about Jesus. Why wouldn't he question Jesus' grim depiction and look for an alternative? And Jesus' response makes sense, especially that when we keep in mind that while he is fully God, he is also fully human. We can imagine that he has the same desire to live that we all have, and that he had to wrestle with his sense of call and discern where it was taking him as it was happening. Imagine being in Jesus' position for a minute, feeling called to something, pursuing it wholeheartedly, and then realizing that it is going to be hard and get ugly. It will require the greatest self-sacrifice imaginable. Despite the portrayal we get in John's Gospel, where Jesus seems more divine than human and where he knows his mission and it doesn't seem that hard for him, that isn't the picture we get from Mark's Gospel. Here we see the paradox and the tension of Jesus' humanity and his unfolding divinity. And if Jesus was fully human, taking on all of the parts of what it means to be human in order to stand in solidarity with us, it meant facing real temptation. When we think about it this way, we can wonder if embedded in Jesus' refusal of Peter was also a plea. Please don't tempt me on the hardest thing I have to do. Please don't start me down that road of second guessing. Please help me be strong. But Jesus can't ask that of his disciples. It's not on Peter or the disciples to be resolved for him. Jesus has to know and be strong for himself. Because when he goes to the cross alone, he's going to have to say yes without any help. Because Jesus was fully human and yet resisted the hardest temptation, it means that we too are capable of such a challenge. And the exchange between Jesus and Peter can help us think about facing our own temptations. I'll give 3 possible examples of how. First, like Jesus, we need to be resolved for ourselves. We can't rely on other people to know or affirm what is right for us. We can't wait for our spouse, friends, families, or coworkers to come along. We make our decision, and then we can invite them to be part, but their participation can't be the deciding factor. Second, when it comes to facing temptation, we need to be firm. It won't help to go down a road of second guessing or making excuses when we know what we need to do. Jesus' firm refusal to Peter came out a little intense, yes, but he got his point across. In this case, and quite often, it's more important to be clear with ourselves and with others than to worry about hurting people's feelings. That's not to say that people's feelings don't matter, but we can't govern our lives by them when we know what we need to do. Third, and finally, it's helpful for us to decide for ourselves ahead of time so that the decision is clear when it comes to the moment of choosing. I read a helpful article on this in a Life Hacker blog, and it said that our interior monologue plays an important role in our ability to resist temptation. And then it noted several studies of how people who said, "I don't," versus "I can't," had greater success with their resolutions. For example, the people who said, "I can't miss my exercise," were less successful in keeping their routine than those who said, "I don't miss my exercise." Only 1 in 10 of the "I can't" group kept their goal, while 8 out of 10 of the "I don't" group kept theirs. When we say "I can't have something," it's about restriction, a negative thing, something that's oppressive. But when we say "I don't do something," we are making a positive claim about who we are and the life that we want to live. We're saying, "I am someone who lives a certain way. Therefore, I don't do things that compromise that lifestyle." Framing it in this way makes it about who we are at our core and who God is calling us to be. Today, Jesus gives us an example of saying no to temptation boldly that can help us avoid temptation in Lent and in life. In closing, I want to offer 2 questions for us to reflect upon. In what areas am I tempted? What do I see in this story about Jesus and Peter that can help me in these situations?